Okay, welcome to this Spinosaurus tutorial. So this rig is from the Tron rigs, which is a really good set of creature rigs and dinosaur rigs. And today I'm going to do kind of a fast walk, or maybe a jog, but like a walk cycle of this dinosaur. Now I haven't really done much dinosaur work professionally, but I have really liked doing it as a hobby. So I thought today I'll try and show you what I know, and if it's useful for someone, great. So recently I've been playing lots of the Jurassic Evolution 2, the park manager game. I say lots, only a few hours, but I really like some of the animations in that game. So I wanted to try and do something which was similar, and I love the Spinosaurus, I love the movies, and yeah, I thought I'd just give this a go. So this is not my first time doing this cycle, but I haven't done many of them, like I said. But like any kind of cycle, you want to start with the contact. Now of course this is quite a heavy creature, so you've got to make sure you really tell the weight. So even in this contact pose, I'm really trying to think about where the weight's going to be. But like a normal walking cycle for a human, they have the same kind of extremes. So the contact pose and the passing pose, up and down. The hips will do pretty similar things, just they will be more extreme in the value they go. But the actual timing is pretty similar. So I'm just going to get a basic pose for this. I do find still that the arms were the hardest thing to animate, mostly because they don't really do anything. Like at least on a walk cycle for a human, they're counterbalancing the body, and for a dog or a cat, of course, they're using their arms to walk. But the dinosaur, they're kind of hanging there, and making them feel kind of connected and alive was the hardest thing for basically any time I do a dinosaur. You'll see later on when I get to the arms how I kind of do struggle a bit. Now, of course, this is a heavy creature, but it's also leaning quite far forward, and especially when they're sort of walking or hunting or even doing anything, they're going to have the chest lower than the hips. So all the weight is being generated by the hips, which means the chest will drag behind the hips. I do find that sometimes, at least with the last time I did this dinosaur, I found it hard to keep them connected, because if you do it too much with the offset, then the hips feel completely separate from the chest and vice versa. But I'll get to that later. So the timing, of course, though, is really important. And I think I settled on about 38 frames for the full 2 steps. So frame 18 was the contact, the contact of the other side. Maybe it's 36, I need to check what I do. But yeah, I'm kind of doing this with reference from the Jurassic Park movies, other animations I've seen, and also just my general feeling of how fast I think this should go. Yeah, so I think I settled on this for now. I think this is basically the whole assignment. So like any cycle I do nowadays, especially with creature work, I do it with layered approach, which I think anyone does if they're doing creatures. And first of all, the hips are what you work on, right? Up and down. Now it's quite a strong up and down pose, because all the force is generated from these hips, as I said, and you really want to get that sort of feeling of weight that goes up slowly and crashes down onto the other leg as it kind of falls. This isn't a run cycle, so there's always one leg contacting the ground, which means you can be a bit softer with the translate Y. But you still need to have the movement across from side to side, though, which has to be quite big, because he's got to carry all that weight on one leg, so it has to make sure the weight is really across and it's holding it properly. So I spent quite a long time in these first 2 curves, the TY and the TX, because they kind of are they drive the personality of the dinosaur. But yeah, so I think the timing looks good at this point. So I'm really trying to get this crashing feeling, and this is something I work on basically till the end of the whole animation. I go back to this TY curve, I think, for a good 90% of this tutorial. Now, I used to work on the feet first, and this applies to all creature work, and I still do the feet quite early on, but I started to get the chest and even some of the head working quite well first, and then I go back and do the feet. I found when I do dinosaurs, because it's so unfamiliar, the movement pattern, because at least for a dog and a cat I can walk on all fours. For a dinosaur I have no real clue how it physically feels. I have to at least try and get that motion in first so I can see what's going on, and then I can adapt the feet and animate the feet according to that. If you're new to the channel though, please do subscribe and give this video a like. I'm really trying to work on my sort of YouTube content at the moment. Trying to do cycles, even if I don't make a tutorial, at least do a cycle every day to upload. Just mostly my own practice, but also because I find it really fun to watch other people's cycles on YouTube, so I thought I'll contribute to that. Yeah, but liking and subscribing really does help, as I really like to get this channel monetized. Okay, so the feet. Now I'm doing a quick foot pose. So I've been going back and forth on what is the correct method for animating the feet in terms of what controllers to use. When I did my first ever dinosaur cycle, I used all of the roll attributes, the toe roll, heel roll, which I do for humans because it's quite simple and I can kind of do it quickly. But I was getting so lost with these massive big toes, so pretty early on I decided that really I'm going to animate individual toe controllers, and maybe also one of the ankle roll, sort of physical controllers. But anything on the foot controller in the channel box, I'm going to leave blank, because it just becomes too confusing to work out which channel's affecting which frame. So yeah, I basically take the physical rotation values and I rotate those. I counter animate the toes according to that rotation, and that was the best method, which was the quickest and the most effective for both making changes but also getting a good looking animation. In terms of the foot arc and pattern, there are similarities to a human, but of course they are more related to birds. If you look at ostriches or even small birds, the way they sort of pick up their claws and they drop them down where they want to put their feet. And I think the final animation of this specific cycle is okay. I could have done a bit better, but I was slightly pressed for time. But overall, you want to make sure that kind of it's dropping down, and as it kind of comes into contact with the ground, the toes then rapidly spread out and take that weight. You don't want to be doing heel strikes or anything like that with the dinosaur. It's just wrong. But if you do have references of like ostriches or like vultures, or even just other references from movies, but like I said, most of archaeologists or paleontologists, sorry, they will say that they're most like birds. Okay, so now I'm working on the chest a bit more. I've got some basic feet animation in there just to get an idea of what's going on. And I basically copy the values of the hips and I take them onto the chest. But then of course I have to change them both from scaling them, as in making them bigger or smaller, and also moving them in time. Like I said, it's going to be dragging, right? So as the hips go up, the chest is going to come down, but it's not going to be a straight sort of even or like opposite motion, because it's got to be connected, right? If I did it completely reversed, it would look completely broken. Right now I can kind of see it looks broken, that there's no real connection between those two parts. So the way to fix that is by really working on those translation Y curves, but also the rotation X curve. So of course, as he is pushing up with the hips, the chest is going to rotate down, the head's going to come down to the ground, and it's like dragging his body up. And if you make sure that you look at the TY curve as well, it's quite a quick drop, but then quite a slow and steady rise. It's the same as when you do a dragon's flight cycle, if anyone's done that before. The hips kind of push the chest up, and then you kind of drop back down as gravity takes over. It's not an even 50% up, 50% down. That would make it feel quite unnatural. So yeah, I do spend a lot of time cleaning these up. I'm still, as I said, I'm not like perfect at these dragon cycles. So sometimes I've got to kind of go in and kind of remind myself what's happening. Like I'd have to change that completely. And I'm just thinking about where the forces is coming from as it goes through the body. So every time I animate something, I'm thinking what's driving that motion. So right now, the rotation of the shoulders and the chest from side to side, so this is the RZ and also the RY, that's been driven by the translation X of the hips, because it's kind of like it's been dragged up when it pushes up, it's also being dragged to the side when you move to the side. So every rotation, you want to basically be countering the previous controller's translations. That's a good way to think about it. Of course, it takes practice and takes like training your eye. And I'm sure any experienced creature animator might see this, and they see the final animation and give me some pointers. And I hope they do actually. If anyone's down below, please comment on the final animation. Talking of which, yeah, I do kind of do these tutorials, not so much for learning and teaching, but I also do it for myself because I'm really trying to improve my animation quality. And right now I'm doing quite a lot of character animation at work, so I'm not really doing any creatures or I guess anything more than just dialogue. So my lip sync's perfect, but everything else sucks. So yeah, now again, really working on this rotation X, because this is the one that I think was the biggest issue in this shot. At least the one that was making me stuck, because I was trying to work out what was going wrong. And it was this one quite a lot. In fact, it's always just something in the hips or the chest. If anything feels broken, always go back to the biggest controller, which is the hips. I think at this point I've got the main character down. So now I'm just going to go and keep refining. And the good thing about layered approach is you really can make changes really quickly. So I'm just looking at the offset of this translation Y, seeing if it makes sense to be a frame later or frame earlier. And I think if you spend the most time on your big controllers, like I said, and you do these quick changes, you'll find that your creature animation really does improve. If there's any animals or creatures you want me to try out next, by the way, I'm trying to do at least one of these sort of time-lapse tutorials a week, maybe even 2. Right now I'm kind of focusing on the cycles, because that's what I'm practicing. But I also am going to do some more beginner style tutorials, like a jump or something like that. So anything you guys want to listen to or hear about, please do comment below and let me know what you want to learn, and I will try my best to make those videos. I'm also still learning about video editing, so please do understand if the quality isn't always high with the audio or the video stuff. I'm still learning, but it's been fun. And thank you so much for people who are watching, because I've got now 1,400 subscribers, and I was kind of amazed that I even got to 1,000. So thank you so much. I'm also not completely sure whether you guys prefer these time lapses, or if you prefer like a real-time 1:1 speed of my animation, either as a time lapse or as a voiceover, or if it's more just me animating live. The issue is if I animate live, I might either not talk or talk too much and never get any animation done. This is why I've chosen this method, because I feel like you get the most learning, or at least the most of my knowledge, while simultaneously seeing the final product or the final workflow pretty fast. And you can always set your video to 0.5 speed if you want to see it properly. Though I would imagine this type of cycle, when it's just adjusting individual curves, is probably slightly tedious to watch at live speed. But let me know what you think, and I can always change up my future videos. Okay, I'm still not happy with this hip and stuff. I think the hips themselves are okay, but the chest is still feeling pretty not disconnected anymore, but like it's not really doing much. It feels a bit too floaty, because of course if you imagine as a human doing the plank, your core is engaged and your upper chest will still be involved, or if you're like bending over doing a deadlift or something. So I want to make sure that the chest feels alive with some motion, but it's just a case of just going in and frame by frame. Now the issue I'm having here is I think I'm really bad at maths, and I miscounted how many frames I needed for each step. At least one of the frames I added too many keys or too many frames, So now I'm trying to work out why there's motion happening, even though I've set the same frame for both frame 1 and frame 36, or at least frame 36. It's really annoying me. I can't work out what's going on. I just can't. Sometimes I always have to physically count the keys with my finger, because I'm so bad at those little small calculations. But yeah, and now going on to the head. So the head is similar to the chest, where it's going to also fall and drag behind the chest, but the head itself, so not the neck, but the head itself is also wants to have control, especially when it's hunting or feeding or preying. He has to make sure that his head's kind of on like a track, which is following his prey, or is separate from the body in terms of its movement. If it's just going to be completely following behind, it's going to feel dead, or like a completely, like, what's the word, out of control sort of bird. However, if you look at real birds flying, their heads are incredibly still, and actually they always stay level regardless of the angle that they're banking or flying at. And dinosaurs, or even like cats and lions, are pretty similar with that. You know, especially prey animals, they want to make sure that they are really focused in on their prey, right? So I'm using the neck to kind of drag up and down, but I'm also countering the head to kind of stay in that same level and that same plane, both in RX, which is, sorry, RZ, so up and down, and also from side to side, which is RY. Later on, I'll be using maybe even now, I'll be using this RX controller to add some sort of jiggle fats to the neck. Basically, you want to make sure that the neck is following the chest, but the head is kind of independent of that and countering any action that happens. You could even do animation where the head's leading. So if you actually look at dragons when they're flying, I say look at dragons, of course they don't exist, but look at any dragon animation from like Game of Thrones, and the head is what's kind of leading that motion. So as the wings start to come down, the head is pushing up into the sky to kind of lead the whole action. And it's the same with dinosaurs, or the same with any big creatures like this. You could very easily have the head and the neck lead that motion, and it will become like a figure of 8, where the head goes up as the hips come up, and then they come back and down as the hips come down, and the chest is kind of the opposite of that. But again, this kind of thing is down to each individual shot and what the character or the personality of the creature is doing. If it's hunting, if it's grazing, if it's carnivore, if it's a herbivore. So yeah, it's case by case. But for dinosaurs, which are carnivores like this one, I think looking at birds and with the head leading the action is a pretty good shout. So now back to the feet. I feel like I've got the head and the body all pretty done, at least for this first pass. So now I want to get these feet. Like I said, I'm going to animate the fingers individually, or the toes individually. I'm not going to work on too many different controllers, it just gets confusing. But yeah, so I'm basically rotating the toes down, and you see how the toes kind of tap the ground, and they kind of that's not a word, they splay out and spread pretty quickly as they impact the ground. This part of the animation, you can see the knees are popping. I do fix that near the end, but it's the part of the animation I hate the most about any sort of cycle, even humans. And it was harder for this shot because I wanted to really have the weight being sold, but the knee kept popping, so I had to find that balance between the two. So the reason I'm extending the timeline is partly so I can see how the cycle works, but also because I want to use a motion trail and I want to see exactly how it's going through that part of the curve without snapping back to frame 0. It's a bit easier to see, because even if it is a perfect cycle, there's a frame skip if you do it that way, because if frame 0 and frame 38 are the same pose, then you're going to get the same pose twice in your cycle. And I could adjust the timeline to be shorter to omit that frame, but it's just easier to make it longer, because I get more flexibility. So yeah, this is where I'm doing the motion trails for the first time. These, like I said, if you watch my previous cycle video where I did a run, I did say like the knees are the hardest part, and it's no different for a dragon or a dinosaur. Yeah, you see this pop though, can't you? So this is kind of what would happen, like the knee would come forward as the hips come down, but it's still popping too much for my liking. And I'm trying to work out which controller to animate, because I think for this contact pose, I'm going to animate some of the extra controllers or the extra values, just so I can really get that nice pose. But I'm just trying to work out which one to use. And for a very split second, I thought about just making it longer, but then I realized A, that's kind of cheating, and B, it won't look as good. So yeah, I left that alone. I had to put it back to 0. I would say that though, as a last ditch effort, if you're ever struggling with the cycle, using the leg length controllers is a valid option, but if possible, try and get it fixed with the anatomically correct proportions of your model, especially for like realistic work like dinosaurs or video games. If you're doing like realistic stuff, if you're doing cartoony stuff, of course you get more freedom. But so I think I used the ankle roll attribute here just to get that sort of pop less visible, and I also used it to improve the impact of the feet by rotating it down, so the ankle does take some of the weight. Again, I would look at reference for this, like go to ostriches, and just looking at these big birds. And also spread out the toes you just saw. It's nice that during the up pose, or the pose where the weight is fully on that leg completely, having the toes like it really spread helps just very subtly selling that weight. And then as you come into your contacts, you can sort of close them up again, they kind of drag together, and they can pick up off the floor like a claw. Now I'm not sure if you saw it earlier, but there were 2 hip controllers which were affecting the leg, and now I'm not using those on purpose. There is a clavicle controller for the arms, and that's also there for like dogs, cats and stuff, and that's okay to use because that's kind of what's correct with the skeleton. But there's no physical way that the legs can move like that if I use those controllers. There's no joint there which can move that way, and if you use them, you're just going to start causing problems with reality, and it's just a bad habit. So I hid those controllers and I'm not going to use them. If there's jiggle controllers and fat controllers, that's a different question that they're fine to use. But this one was actually animating the entire thigh, and it was moving it up as if it was taking weight like a shoulder, but there's no shoulder in the hips. So now I'm thinking if I should animate the chest. Yeah, I think I changed this. I think I realised that I actually want the down pose to be at a different point. Not too different, I mean the overall shot's the same, but just a few frames different. Again, if everyone's watching this, especially the final version, and says that looks wrong, that shouldn't be there, especially anyone who does this professionally, please do comment and tell me. I'm so happy to learn and improve. And I want to make sure everyone knows that I'm not a professional creature animator. Like, I'm not in VFX doing this stuff right now. I've done creature work in the past, but mostly more cartoony stuff, to be fair. But I have done this stuff, but I'm not like a guru in these sort of things. This is more my own learning journey, and hopefully people can join me. But I would never claim to be an expert with a dinosaur. So here, I'm just trying to work out ways to get the knees to be popping less, but also feel that weight. And I do think that, to be honest, I'm not sure this was completely successful with the weight. I've done a few cycles, like I said, and I think this one's a bit rushed, and it's not my favourite of the dinosaur ones. But I think it's still a good video to learn from. I'm even learning just watching it back, so hopefully some people else learn stuff. Oh, in terms of the feet width, I didn't really talk about this. Because of the way they have quite a big belly and a big sort of lots of fat and muscle, the legs are quite wide. If you have like a raptor or something a bit skinnier or smaller, then they can't come in. And I would maybe imagine different genders have different gaits, but I mean that's so speculative. I know, for example, humans, like men and women, obviously walk differently, but that's probably too much detail for what is essentially a movie. But yeah, I think the weight of the hips feels better now, and I think at least this right leg is feeling pretty good. So I'm going to copy this animation. I'm going to use Animbot for this. You can just copy and paste it, but Animbot's a bit quicker. So yeah, I'm just checking it's all okay still. If anyone has used Animbot, please comment down your favourite thing about it, because I've asked everyone this question and everyone has a different answer. For me, it's probably the motion trails, because everything else I can live without. But motion trails are literally, they're my lifeblood. If I couldn't have them, I would probably be that's not English. I'll be a very bad animator. Also, if you don't have Animbot, I recommend at least doing the free trial if you're an intermediate or like past beginner. If you're a beginner, then I would skip it. You need to learn Maya first and animation principles first. But just learning Maya itself is important. But after that, there's so many shortcuts that Animbot gives you. And I also have some scripts at the top. You can see on my shelf there, some scripts. But all of them are just doing things Maya can do, but just a bit faster. But one example of the Animbot sort of stuff is you can see my tangents are all kind of split, as they're not equal from frame 0 and frame 38. So that means that they're going to be a weird spacing issue when I do the cycle. So Animbot can fix that with one of its patterns. I'm doing it manually as well sometimes. Just try to fix these curves again, make it all clean. So adding some jiggle controllers. This could probably be done at the end, but I'm doing it now for some reason. I think I wanted a break from the hips, to be honest. And I would have spent more time on this, but I was kind of setting myself a limit of 1 hour. I did go over this time. It took me about perhaps an hour and 15 minutes. But yeah, it's okay, I guess. Maybe an hour 20. The jiggle controllers, I mean, the big ones are kind of just following the motion of the body. The offset, I'm sure there's scripts out there. Sadly, this rig doesn't have any muscle controllers like jiggle ones. I know some of Chung's other rigs do. This one's a free rig and it's really good quality for a free rig. So I'm not complaining. But yeah, it would be nice to have some jiggle, especially in the hips and maybe even the shoulders. So this is the part where I start doing the shoulder and the arms. And while I don't sort of, what's the word? I think the final result is fine, but for some reason I was just getting confused and going around in circles for a good 5, maybe even 10 minutes. Because like I said, I'm not really sure how it would work, because I don't want it to be just loose and hanging. I want it to feel like it has tension, but at the same time I don't want it just to be completely, stiff. So I have to work out the best balance. And on top of that, I need to work out how it would actually drag with the body, because I want it to still have some offset and some carried over momentum. So finding out which control I should be animating. I was going around in circles and my brain wasn't working. I always film these things quite near the end of my day, like towards midnight, so I was a bit tired. But basically, the way I was doing it, I'm not quite sure if this is the correct way, but I was going to imagine it's like a quadruped, where the back leg is kind of kicking the arm forward, but just not quite as much, just more subtle. So you can't really see it in the arm, but the shoulder also slightly animates. Just basically, just a bit, I guess, just following through from the legs and making it subtle. I also wanted to make sure they were different from each arm, just to have a bit more variety. I think it was the shoulders and the arms and the jiggle controllers I could have spent more time on. But overall, I'm pretty happy. Yeah, so because there's no jiggle controllers, I'm using this Clavicle translation control, which I wouldn't normally animate because it isn't really correct. Just like I didn't animate the hips, as in those hip controllers. I don't really want to animate this one on top. There's a clavicle controller with rotations, that's fine to animate. That's how the clavicles work. The really big circle one. But the one on top, which is really small, I'm only animating it really, really subtly up and down, just to feel like it's being affected by the weight of the dinosaur. So as the hips crash down, they kind of have that follow through animation, just a little bit. I think, yeah, it's getting pretty close to being okay. Just copy and pasting curves, fixing tangents. I mean, this is all cycles really are. It's just copy and pasting. Even for like a human walk cycle now. Yeah, I think those arms, maybe not the fingers are pretty poor quality, but I think the arms look okay. So now you have some scaling. So I want the neck to feel a little bit more like it's leading the action, like I said earlier. So what you can do is just get the scale box open, set it to 1.2 to have it go bigger, or like 0.8 if you want it smaller. Select the curves and just hit apply a bunch of times. It's also how I do the tail in a second, you'll see that. Normally I actually use some plugins or some scripts for the tail. There's a good one called Overlapper. And there's also some actual simulation plugins you can buy, which basically means one click, tail's done. And yeah, I would do that if I was working at production, or if I was just really, really strapped for time. But I thought I might as well show you the workflow I use when I don't have any scripts. It's the same way I did the neck just there, just very subtly scaling keys and offsetting keys to get your overlap. But you'll see that in a second. Yeah, the hand's still annoying me, so I went back and did them again. So yeah, I'm just checking to make sure it is actually keyed. Also, do you also work in stacked view for the graph editor? I was told the other day that I'm the only person that they saw or they've seen using stacked. I honestly couldn't live without stacked. Like, I do like the other modes, I do use them as well. Like especially the true value, which is 1 on the keyboard. But stack view for me is just so much information in a very clean hierarchy. It's just so useful. But it'll be interesting to know. Even my UI, like so many people I know at work, they have their graph editor at the bottom or on another screen. Weirdly enough, if I'm doing like a cinematic shot, like a TV shot, which I do every day, my shot cam's always on my separate monitor. And all my sort of controls and how I actually animate is all on one screen. And also have Netflix on while I work. Nearly always. Just background stuff, really. I watch The Office quite a lot. Yeah, as he said earlier, these shoulders are really like playing with my brain. I swear, like even in the cycle I did last week, that other tutorial, there's always one part where my brain just exploded and I couldn't do anything, and this is that moment in this video. But I think I'm almost at the point where I get it correct. Yeah, here's that shoulder animation I was talking about. Very subtle, just using the translations just up and down a tiny bit. Yeah, we're checking the side to side motion, because I think this is also affecting the arms a bit. Yeah, as I said a billion times before, if anything ever looks strange, just always check the hierarchy of controllers, go up the chain until you find some curve which is causing problems, or some tangent that's the wrong sort of handle type. And I think I fixed the chest. I think this is the chest that I'm happy with now. It felt like it was hitting a wall, and like it was dropping down, like, and then like if there's like an imaginary wall by his elbow, it was hitting that wall and stopping and then dragging back up again. I wanted it to be a bit softer, because the drop down is fast, but it's still going to have some overlap in the chest, and it's also part of the rotations as well, the rotation X. I'm watching this animation back now while I'm doing it. I think I overdid the shoulder animation. Or maybe I did it the wrong way around. I'm not quite sure what it is, but something looks a bit wrong here. Like I said, that's why I make these videos, really. So I can learn and then show you why I'm a bad animator. And I'm joking, of course. I feel like I'm okay. But yeah, it's still useful for me to watch this. Another trick you can do is, well, I say trick, just something to try. Turn off your textures and turn on the wireframe overlay. You can see how the mesh is deforming, and it does sometimes help you working out how much or how little you need to animate something. It's also good for when you're doing facial animation. If you see how like the eyelids are deforming and stuff, you can make sure that you're not breaking the rig too much. Because sometimes it looks fine in the viewport, but then in rendering, it's just broken. So I get shots sent back at the office quite often. Say me, everyone does, it's not just me. In the office we're using Unreal Engine 5 for the rendering. I'll be animating Maya. So you export the FBX and then into a sequencer and rendering. So it takes time to set that up. So making sure there's no issues in that is important. I also want to learn Unreal 5. I know it for some things, but I don't know it for the like landscape or level creating stuff. I know it for the sequencer and for the rendering stuff, but one of my current plans is to take one of my animations, like a dragon or a dinosaur, and then I'm going to render it in Unreal, like a forest or something. But I'm quite busy, so it's low down on my list. But I need to learn how to make simple environments. And I know the theory behind it, but I haven't done it. Yeah, so this is a very long section for the arms, I know, but I'm nearly done. Like 1 more minute left for the arms. But yeah, everything is just dragging. I think I decided to go pretty loose with all the limbs, so the fingers and as well. Just having it kind of just like a nice bounce rhythm, like a figure of 8 motion, going side to side, up and down, but not at the same time. So you get that nice figure of 8. Making sure my tangents, I'm pretty sure when I do finish this, half my tangents are wrong. But you will see in the final animation. So in the final animation, I do add a few more details, which is not in this video. So I'm going to go over the method I did that, because it's not really animation, it's more about using animation layers and adding texture. So what you can do is you can take your cycle, your plain vanilla cycle, which could be anything, not just this. And then normally I use a new file or I use Studio Library to import the animation so I don't break this file. And you take the animation, make a cycle, and then on the animation layer, you add in the controllers you want to sort of add texture to, like for example the neck. And I added like a neck shake, like a neck twist, which you can see in the animation. But all that is just the neck controllers on an animation layer, and I animated the rotation X back and forth like a wave, and then looped it back into the cycle. So I think in total It's about 7 or 8 keys and just, you know, the cycle repeated 2 times or 3 times, and the layer on top of that cycle. And you can also add in head turns. You can even change the height of like the hips if they're going over a rock or stepping over something. I mean, animation is good already for like using cycles and stuff, but using animation layers is a way to make your cycles pop even more. So I really recommend looking into those. Yep, doing the fingers, just copying the animation from the elbow, and with the curves at least, and just kind of translating it onto the fingers. And then even offsetting the finger joints themselves. It's pretty subtle, it's pretty dirty, but yeah. For this sort of, it's not really a close-up shot, so it's kind of good enough. And I'm running out of time now. I think I have like 10 minutes left before we need to sort of stop. So I need to move on to the tail, which is the last thing I need to do. So the tail is the same method you just saw with the fingers, basically. I animate the individual curves one by one. So let's do the, the Z first. And I just get the up and down and I animate them together as one big piece, like this. And then do the other extreme, so the down pose. And then what this does, it just gives you the motion. And then I can go and offset each controller by 1. Sometimes 2, depending on what I want to do. And then I can take the controllers and I can scale them or shrink them depending on how much I want them to move. So here's the offsetting process, just one by one. So I can already see it's kind of working. And then I'm going to take them all, might even move them back in time. Just play around with them in terms of how you want them to look. This is really case by case, you've got to go in and see. Always remember that they are being driven by the hips though. And then I go in and let's say I want to make the tip a bit more wavy. I can scale up the tip, just those controllers. Maybe skip, there you go. And then the tip is now more wavy, but the trunk of the tail is still the same. Make sure you select the controllers. I keep hitting apply and it applies it to scale and translations. So I make that mistake so many times. At work I have a hotkey which bypasses that for me. But yeah, you got to make sure you select the actual curves you want to scale. See, I think I did like 10 times. My brain is so out of gas or energy that I'm kind of running on autopilot at this point. Okay, then do the same method for the rotation Y though. You just gotta basically go in, find the extremes, and then you can animate it and offset the keys. It's the same. Again, scaling things. I think this is pretty much done. I think I do a quick check of the feet, and then I also do scale up the tail a little bit more. So like I said, this animation is not perfect. I do polish this a little bit more in terms of doing that animation layers method. But the base animation is the same as you see in this video. And then I just go in and do a few bits of cleanup with the making the head turn while it's walking, and I loop the cycle about 4 times and add that information on top. But yeah, I think that's the cycle really. So here is the final cycle. I polished it slightly using the head twist that you can see there, and I rendered it in Arnold. Everything else is kind of the same that you saw in the video. The workflow I used and the references I used and also the way I animated it was all the same. And this is just the polished version really with a few things tweaked. So hopefully this was useful for someone, even just one person, would be great. And please do like and subscribe to the channel if it was useful. And if you want to let me know what kind of video you want me to make next, I'll be really grateful. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.